like this spot. There's too many farms on there.
That spot back. But I'm usually, you know, my garage. Put my computer on my garage. See, I can stand up and messed up tape. I don't like it.
Good morning. Welcome to the CROA Board of Directors Workshop, Monday, August 20th, 2018. It's 9:30 a.m. We'll call this meeting to order. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt.
Thank you, Debbie.
Second.
Thank you, Jack. All in favor? All right. So that passes unanimously. Just a quick announcement before we do quick updates, or two quick announcements. First, the workshop today is 90 minutes in length, in contrast to our normal 2 hours. We have an executive session, and this is the second announcement. We have an executive session that follows on a couple of issues, one of which involves our attorney, and it has to do with the lawsuit that's been filed where CROA is named, filed by the Lexan. Am I correct in saying that?
Just, I think the proper, it's a list pending, it's foreclosures filed where CROA has been named.
CROA has been named, and it involves Town Center Condo Association and so forth. So with that context, any discussion that we might normally have in public session needs to, having to do with Town Center and Lexan, I think needs to be deferred until after we get advice from our attorney. And I know that one of our agenda items has to do with Halloween planning, just to make sure we're on track, but we really can't talk about how we might engage Lexan until we get advice from the attorney. Yes, Jack?
I'm sorry, but I would ask that we review the agenda. I'd like to add an item on there.
Okay.
And that would be the discussion of the proposed dumpster issue that CDD is about to vote on tomorrow night.
Can we just subsume that within the CDD budget process?
That's fine.
Yeah, I would like to have that in there also, because that's of time urgency. Thank you. Is that okay? Okay, so moving forward, quick updates, and then we'll move into more of our content. Just any planning for the town hall session, we do have that scheduled for Monday, September the 10th.
No, 17th.
17th, thank you.
The 10th is the budget workshop.
Yeah, so budget workshop is all
I'll
day
start running together
on the
now.
10th, Monday the 17th at 6 o'clock in this room. And any further planning, besides it's going to be, it's announced, it'll be noted in our September 1st article for the CROA newsletter.
We'll have it in the newspaper.
It's just, but it's part of a CROA update. I think we'll need an ad.
If we can put, like something quarter page, just. Already done. You're the man.
Yeah, he has some marketing piece that he put together.
Awesome. And I mean, I personally, I don't know what to expect, but I want to listen. That's the big point I think that we talked about last month or last week, is to go ahead and hear how we're doing and what we are doing well and what we're not doing well, so that we can continue to grow.
Part of our prior discussion was a 5, 10, 15-minute briefing by the board. How do we want to manage that, or do we not want to do that? What's the desire of the board for this town hall session? I agree with your point of listening.
Is it worth possibly inviting any other vendors? I don't know if a rep from the CDD wants to come in. I don't know if somebody from Anatomy wants to. I don't know. It's up to them, but perhaps just extend the invitation. I don't know how everyone feels about that.
For presentation purposes or listening purposes?
Questions. I mean, if a owner has a question and it's not underneath the board that can answer it, perhaps Bennett may be sitting here in the room representing Anatomy, and he can answer that question. He might be able to, he might not, but at least he can hear it. So
I think inviting people to answer a question only is not a bad idea at all. I think it's actually good. And I thought we were going to start with David giving a few general comments, and then we were going to have somebody give an update on the athletic fields. And we had one other topic I'm drawing a blank on. So.
Financial update.
That's the athletic fields.
Who would do that? Okay, so we'll have a couple of brief updates. We'll keep that to a minimum. Do we have a time? Do we want to set a time limit on the town hall meeting, or just go where it goes? What's the desire?
I think it's the athletic fields and the interlocal. We were going to talk about the interlocal with the county. Those were the two items. Just to briefly state where they're at.
I hope it wouldn't be a dud, but if we put a time to a time, then we're going to be here the whole time.
Okay.
Let's start it at, let's say, 6 o'clock. And if it's a dud, unfortunately, then by 7 o'clock it's done. You know, if the questions aren't there, it's meant to listen.
Okay.
So
So we're starting at 6. So it's 6 p.m. Does that work for you, JR, or did you put an end time on it?
No, there's no wait time. There's light refreshments listed as 5:30 and then meeting at 6. There's no
Okay,
wait time.
that's fine.
So we're gonna have food, so not a dud, at least.
there we go. We got something going.
Emphasis on the word light. Vaughn,
Sir, I'm good with it.
you're good with,
Define
for the
light,
light refreshments?
define light refreshments, what's that mean?
Steak and lobster.
Pardon?
Wine and cheese.
Oh, don't say that.
You're a good man.
And we'll run out of cheese early, right? All right, anything else on town hall? Okay. Athletic, recreation fields, and concession building, any update?
I do. I have some news from last week. We met with Osceola County and had our pre-construction meeting, and they signed off on everything. So this week, you'll start seeing some equipment showing up on site. Next week, I think on Tuesday or Thursday, the silt fencing will start going up, and then you'll start seeing some construction, moving of dirt going on out there. We are planning on having a groundbreaking ceremony, and we would like to look at September 12th, I believe that's a Wednesday, at 4:30 in the afternoon.
Sorry, I'm not available that day.
It's warm all day now in August, and it's been brutal out there.
What about earlier
So
in the morning?
we have that week available. We wanted to give you a date because I reached out and see if anybody had any times that just won't work. So that was what we initially threw down. We have Tuesday through Thursday of that week if there's a better date that works for the board as a whole.
What's the purpose of a groundbreaking?
So that you can get some pictures taken with shovels in the ground, and
You will be famous, you will have your picture in the paper.
it's more of to get us ready for promoting it in the newspaper, and just a nice little ceremony that we've had for construction of new amenities.
I don't know.
There's a precedent for it. We've done it.
Oh, I'm sure there's precedent for it. I mean, we put our reputations up on the shelf and admire them, but I don't know. We're doing it, let's do a good job of doing the field, so I don't think the groundbreaking makes a difference one way or the other, but that's me.
I think it's a good way to promote the town, publicize it, show them what we're doing out there, or even the general public outside of Celebration. I think it's a good way to advertise what we're about here.
So when we have a groundbreaking, do we know roughly a date that we can really put our feet on the ground and say that we know it's going to open? Because I'm going to be awfully embarrassed if we take a picture for a groundbreaking and there's a delay for 2 years on something. You know what I mean? So I just want to be positive that that's happening if my business is going on.
Your contract with ARNCO is 6 months completion from notice to proceed. Notice to proceed's August 27th. So they'll have 6 months from that date to complete. Now,
Probably
if a hurricane comes or...
Right.
I mean, I think you're outside, I would think 6 months could go to 8 months if you had a bad hurricane, but I mean, I don't think you should have an issue there.
Stu, is there any chance of doing anything earlier, like 9:30 or 10?
There is. The only thing, we were looking at getting kids there because they're lacrosse, youth soccer, youth flag football kids. It'd be nice to have some there as part of the groundbreaking. They're in school during that time.
Jackson, you don't have to go.
I mean, much as I would love another photo op,
Ceremony.
Every new park that I've ever been part of, there's always been some kind of small
It's
groundbreaking.
So,
I don't want to belabor the point.
so we're looking at the 12th?
Well, Jack said he's not available. Are there any other dates and times that any other board members aren't available?
We have a budget workshop that Monday.
On Monday. Monday's off limits, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have to go Tuesday through
CCD
Thursday.
workshop is
We
Tuesday.
were going to do it on Monday instead of budget.
Well, if we want to replace the budget work session, that's fine. Does Thursday work?
Not Tuesday the 11th, so.
Jack said he wasn't available the 12th and 13th, I thought, right?
Right.
So 12, 13.
You want to do 14th? I don't care.
Is that Friday? Friday doable?
Not doing that for sure.
Oh, we have a food truck Friday that week.
I do without me.
Wednesday or Thursday.
No,
Wednesday.
for Friday, I just don't want to go to 5 o'clock.
Right.
I gotta get that.
Well, if we do it at 4:30 on that Friday,
I
it won't
won't
be
be
enough
there
time to
Friday,
give.
but that's fine.
So if we don't have all board members on Friday, then I'm going to recommend doing it on Wednesday or Thursday.
Just tell me.
Wednesday or Thursday.
All right, well, we'll just let you know then. We'll take a
That's
date and
fine.
time.
That's fine. And you want some kids there, so we'll enjoy
Clear as
it.
mud now on what day we're
I think
looking for,
that's
so.
Okay, so 12th or 13th?
There are I had one question for the group. We have Jack as our liaison for the
Construction
bi-weekly
meetings?
meetings. If Jack can't make it, should we have a backup for Jack, or is that?
That
Good
would be
idea,
fine.
bad idea, that's a question.
Oh, in general for the ongoing meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point.
And just so that everyone's aware, those meetings will take place, the first one this Thursday, just to get us set up and going, and then after that, September 5th is our next meeting, and they'll be every other Wednesday. And we just meet, it's usually about an hour at the CDD building, and then any issues that we need to talk about related to construction, sometimes we'll have to get out and walk the site, but we usually do them at the CDD building because they're right there next to the construction.
Someone like to be a backup?
I'd be all about it if nobody else is
Okay,
up for it.
great.
So I'll just go ahead and forward you the invite then, Kevin. And it's okay if you both come.
If you both come,
It's
or,
fine.
yeah, that's great, because sometimes you'll be,
Okay. I'll work on clearing that.
okay, next item, management consultant review process.
We had a meeting with the professor,
David Mitchell?
David Mitchell, Jackson, David, and myself last week.
And Steve.
And Steve, sorry. The first meeting we'd had was really kick the tires. I was gone, I was on the cruise. Everybody was there. We really refined this meeting down to, all right, performance management metrics is something that Steve was excited about. And then the second thing we talked about was sustainability, and really sustainability meant, can we sustain the process if CCMC weren't here, if Steve got hit by a
Win the lottery,
milk
Steve
truck,
wins the lottery.
or wins
Not
the
get
lottery,
hit by any of
whatever.
our
Construction truck on the athletic fields.
So he is developing a new updated proposal, which we got a draft of early this morning, I believe. It's going to be almost like an A and an A-1. A is going to be the performance metrics and what they would involve, what they would run. B would be, any sustainability add-on. Sustainability add-on, I'll be perfectly clear, kind of goes to the request for proposal process that happened last year, and the comments were made that there wasn't adequate enough documentation to even do a request for proposal. Steve clearly stated the other day that's not a true statement. There is more than adequate documentation. So we may make the sustainability process part of this proposal sweet and nifty. At the end of the day, we're trying to get a proposal in place that we could actually share with the board and give you a feel. The first one was pretty broad all over the place. And then it needs to come to this board and say, okay, is this something we're really interested in? Yes or no? From a timing perspective, it'd be great to make this part of the budget cycle. It's either in or it's not in. I'm not sure it's black and white, it should be in or not in, but at least we should have a conscious discussion about it and make a decision. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think given the proposal that I've read this morning, we could move to add an action item in the September board meeting and to workshop this in September and distribute at some point a more revised version of the proposal to all the members of the board. I think we're making progress towards that.
Are we going to, is the board good with not going beyond this one group from UCF and getting other proposals from other people that have been involved in this process before, other companies, or are we just going to go with one?
Can I speak to that? I mean, I think it's a really good question. There are a couple of challenges that we face. One is, and it's acknowledged even in the proposal, no other community has done what we're proposing to do here. This is a unique circumstance and opportunity. Therefore, it's not like we can go out and Google management consultant evaluations. We could go to CAI and probably find some folks that would be willing to do that. However, I think initially our view was that we would rather go to an academic source that's local, that then gives us the ability as a public interest. We are getting a reduced price from them to do this work and have the ability to create a long-term relationship. Now, if it's the view of the board that we need to go out and get 3 bids, that's going to mean 3 times through this process of explaining what we are, what we want to do, and where we're going, that ultimately ends up back where I suspect we are right now. I think that the point of the 3 bids is to say, have you explored alternatives? And if the board's feeling is that we should explore more alternatives, we can. However, if we want to get a report that's completed, let's say in January or February of next year, that may be a challenge to do if we have to go back through the evaluation process and start this and do it again with multiple players. So I'm not sure that when we're done with all that, Vaughn, that we end up anywhere differently than where we are today, given that this is a one-off and there's really only, so far, we've only uncovered one source that can do what we want done.
Well, except for the fact we haven't even researched CAI, if they in fact do such a thing. I mean, I feel like we're going back to what last year when we were dealing with the RFP process, you know, where we went, some people wanted it and some didn't. And I'm just wondering if not just the money aspect of it, you know, that the cost, but also the quality of the service, the review. You know, that's at hand as well. So it just seems that if I had a vote, I would say go ahead and look at other options too. But I understand your point. Yeah, local and
well, I don't think there's any reason we can't go out and look. I just want to be clear that I think there's a built-in bias if we go to CAI.
What is that bias?
In favor of status quo management. We were trying to find a more open-ended, neutral kind of posture, I think, in this process. An organization that didn't have a bias in favor of management or homeowners, that was just trying to help us do the best job we can do, both as a board and management.
And if I might add, I think this should be discussed when we actually look at the proposal. Where we've ended up in 2 conversations with the draft back, which I haven't read, is that we're actually trying to even define what might the project look like. But we need this group to discuss the project, and is this something the group is even interested in?
Yeah.
If we say, okay, we like the paper, or we've tailored the proposal, and we want to float that proposal out to 2 parties that we pick in CAI, fine, we can make that decision, but we need to actually first, I think, get a proposal done that we can say, this is what it would look like.
So 2 things in terms of scheduling. One is for the budget workshop, we can choose to put a budget item in, don't have to have the details. It's a placeholder. Second, going back to your earlier point, to workshop this. Once the board has looked at the proposal, if it seems to meet your all's muster from the conversations, and to see how the board as a whole, and then it becomes a part of a community discussion. Is this going to answer the questions that we need to have answered at this point in time?
Yeah, I think Brian's right about, you know, this proposal gives us a starting point, and then if we want to take that and present it elsewhere to get bids or get input, I would rather do that than to start at ground zero with everybody and do what we've now spent several hours trying to do just to get us to this point.
Yeah.
Does that satisfy your concerns, Vaughn?
Yeah, I think we have to find out what we're looking for
Yeah.
Exactly.
to begin with. And then after that, you know, we can go and find out who's able to do that kind of work for us. But we need to know what we want to accomplish first.
But
Go ahead.
No, finish. To your earlier point, and this is from my research a year ago, I couldn't find anybody. I couldn't find anyone who did this for a homeowners association. This is odd from our work. So we may end up finding nothing, but we can further confirm that more systematically.
Yeah, I think Vaughn's point is the next step beyond where we are right now, and I think it's a valid one. The last thing I think you know that I want to do is have something happen behind the scenes or differently and not exposed. But we're trying very hard to not involve the entire board at the early stages so that we can bring something to you that then is worthy of conversation.
Sound good? Good.
Fine.
Okay, so we'll have this on the agenda. Our next actual board workshop outside the budget workshop is October. Am I correct in that date?
I believe so. We don't have any.
Yeah, because we don't have it, we have the all-day budget session, and then we have the town hall meeting in September.
Unless you choose to schedule another one.
Let's-
There's
we-
none
No, let's
scheduled at
just,
this
we
point
can
in
put
time.
this
I think
on
we're
for the
okay.
very early
For the
October.
very first one, I think it's whatever the first Monday is. Then hurricane plan review. So you distributed the latest hurricane plan?
Correct. And so the hurricane plan was distributed to the board. There are some side conversations outside of what that plan entails, because that plan is what we're going to do to protect the amenities of the association, and then some of the communication aspects of that. And some questions and concerns have been brought up about, well, how do you ensure that people that have home projects are cleaning up their stuff? So if they're in the middle of a roofing project, how do you ensure that that's being done? We've talked about next year in 2019, updating your charter. So that is an opportunity where you can write something in there that during that process, there's a requirement that you're cleaning up prior to a hurricane. There's also been some questions about dumpsters and dumpsters overflowing. And I think that you have another conversation about county ordinances and dumpsters, and now's the time to get that type of wording in there. So as far as where we're sitting right now, we feel like we're prepared for any storms that we have. We feel like we were prepared last year for what was labeled as one of the largest storms to hit. So you always prepare for the biggest and hope for a smaller size storm. We've got our connections ready with EOC, with Osceola County, the group here internally in town that is comprised of CDD, all of our landscapers, so that we can have them on standby for emergency cleanup. The Thriving in Place, the Foundation, all these different groups are all ready to meet if that's called upon. The one thing we do not have, though, and we had last year, is we had 2 board liaisons assigned to come to those planning meetings. So I would like to ask, while we have this agenda item on the floor, if we could talk about who would represent the CROA board from the hurricane storm preparation planning standpoint. And then preferably someone that we could go to afterwards also during cleanup and those types of things to communicate and talk about what's happening.
Volunteer. Who was the second?
I'll do it.
Jack?
Jack
and Vaughn. Okay. If one of you change your mind, I'm happy to volunteer also. Okay. Anything else on that? Last but not least, CDD budget process. Vaughn, you made a presentation at the workshop, was it last week or week before?
Week before.
Week before, thank you. And their board meeting is tomorrow night, am I correct?
Yes.
And you made a presentation about the concern about security, budget line item for sheriff.
I did. Initially, there was a question that came up on the CDD board about not funding our local deputy sheriff. And they, on the board, well, one member on the board had a proposal without the cost for the sheriff, pulled it out of the budget, the deputy, and another with it in, from what I understand. And I went and spoke because the board gave me the authority to go and speak and give our position on that, which was to not cut the sheriff out of the budget for the town, because we, as we all agreed, it's not just that you have someone here that's watching speeders and things like that. It also involves, and I've been involved in local contracting with law enforcement in the past in my previous job down in the Miami area, but it involves having somebody that's familiar with the community, knowing the streets, knowing the people, all the players in town, who to contact right away. And we just felt it was a dangerous thing to take that immediate presence out of the community, because it doesn't take long for the word to get around to the bad guys out there that, oh, by the way, Celebration's deputy is no longer. And so, and if you think you're going to get the same security coverage as was mentioned at the CDD meeting from deputies that are assigned in the general area of Celebration, but out on 192 and elsewhere, if you're going to get the response time that you have now, it's not going to happen. And then the comment came up about, well, the Publix over there is going to be taken over by the sheriff as a substation, and they felt that that would put more deputies in our area here. Well, from what I understand from the sheriff's department is that they're not going to add deputies there. It's going to be more of a convenience for deputies to report for work, to go do paperwork, to and from work, just a local station. It's not going to add personnel. In fact, they're so short right now because now they have to provide security for the school system. So they're really having trouble keeping deputies. So we spoke against getting rid of the deputy in Celebration for all those reasons and probably a few more that I can't get off the top of my head. And the board agreed to put it back in the budget. The CDD board agreed to put it back in the budget, but you've got to attend these meetings. And I'm speaking to all the community out here. You need to attend these meetings and voice your opinion on this, because it's just a matter of, as they call, a flick of the Bic pen, and it's gone. So you've got to speak up and make your voices heard out there, because it's that quick. You could lose something that I feel personally, the board feels, is very important to us here in the town.
Please, right.
Should we, since Vaughn spoke at the last meeting, and I know Jack, I don't know if you're going tomorrow, but Jackson also speaks, might be wise just have Jack get up and reinforce the importance of this to CROA. That's what I was thinking.
Good point. Is tomorrow budget time for them? Budget decision time?
Not decision, it's
Well, no, but they're still discussing their budget.
Okay, so they're voting on the budget tomorrow.
September is when.
There was a lot of
September
slicing and dicing of that budget. I
Right.
mean, you're talking about, they cut out so much money out of leaf cleanup,
Street sweeping.
cleanup, trees trimmed, cleaning sidewalks, that was not included. I mean, there's all kinds of things that got cut out that look like they're going to get cut out. Let's put it that way.
So having a voice tomorrow, and then a presence by any of the rest of us,
Well, I hope-
and the community.
hope a lot of community.
And the
people show
community.
up at that meeting.
Yeah. Good, so thank you for that.
Just
on the same item, we have a couple other things. Yeah,
I got a new item too.
so a related item in terms of CDD budget process was a discussion in this room last week, was a workshop, it was about a 3-hour workshop talking about roadways. They had 7 agenda items, one of which I want to bring to our attention that is consistent with what Jack was saying, which was a surprise to me sitting in the audience, is that they're proposing a county ordinance having to do with dumpsters, and it involves CROA, and it's like, this is a surprise, has not been vetted by us. Jack shared the draft from 4 years ago, approximately, with the board, and so I, again, Jack circulated that, and I weighed in and said, we just need some board discussion on that as to our action. We have not workshopped it or discussed it at
So had you
all.
brought it to the CDD, or how did it get there?
What happened was, 4 years ago, when I came back on the board, I passed that out to every one of the board members. It never went to any discussion or evaluation by our board. I'd also shared it with some members of CDD, because at the time, I was on a safety committee with Cliff Akingy and Jerry Weiland and Sal Negro and some other people. So it kind of laid there dying for a long time. And then 2 months ago, Floyd asked me if I still had that. So I passed it on to him. However, I had not updated or even reviewed it. And when I created it originally, it had been combined with various other homeowners associations that had such proposals and stuff like that. It committed CROA to being responsible for the permitting action, which I think is totally wrong and should be going to the county, because that creates a situation where we're going to be collecting county money. So that's why I'm not in favor of this right now. I want to take CROA out of this and put the county in the proper place. They should be responsible for the permits and the applications.
So the county does now do permits for dumpsters?
No.
No permits at all for a dumpster on the county road?
Is there any reason why you can't, as the CDD and as the CROA board, tell the county that it's important to us that they put an ordinance in place to address on-street dumpsters, and then let them develop the ordinance?
Well, I talked with Ron Cole from Code Enforcement many years ago about that, and he said, hey, I like this, I'll take it back there and show the commissioners this. And then I asked him about it, and a couple months later he came back and said, what they're considering doing is a roadway utilization permit. And whereas code enforcement would issue a permit for a certain number of days and have certain requirements that be done. About a year later, I asked them about what happened with that, and they said, nothing.
Yeah, and you have their attention now through the CDD to talk about these other issues that they're working with. I just don't see their attorneys even approving the ordinance the way that it's being presented here. I think that they're going to want to develop their own ordinance.
Right.
And it makes sense for them to enforce it since it's on their property. It's just, it doesn't give, we have no enforcement. Even if they write it in there, we still don't because we have no authority over the streets.
I never pushed it because for us to get it passed from, I mean, there are two communities that have their own special ordinances regarding parking. That's over Indian Wells. It's over by Walmart over there in 535. And I was told to get it passed, it required a complete vote of the community, 51% vote of the community. I said, that'll never happen. We'll never get everybody to go in this direction. So I never pursued it. The other way is to go to the commissioners and ask them to do it. So that would be what the CDD would need to be doing, is talking to the commissioners about creating this ordinance properly.
It would seem to me that since we have Jack speaking tomorrow on the one issue, we ought to have him speak on this one too. And at a minimum, we ought to say, hey, you can't commit CROA to something without CROA's board even having seen the document and discussed it.
Well, I think we need to notice them earlier than that they need to
You want me to write something, or Kevin write something as a sense of the board to their board and to Gary?
It seems like it still makes sense, though, to say, we don't want you to take on-street dumpsters off your radar. We just need you to...
Exactly.
And I got to say, the ordinance, years later, I thought there's other things that probably could have been added to it. So
let's review it.
I've never done any editing or reviewing it, and that's why...
It's the mechanism here in the specifics. Do you want to write something, or you want me to
I
write
could
something?
draft something along the lines of, we don't necessarily have a huge opinion on it right now, but for this and future items, please include us in the discussion if you're going to include us in the discussion.
Well, you all do have an opinion, though, on on-street dumpsters, and you want them to go away. You don't want people wrapping them with Christmas decorations. I mean, that just is not acceptable for this community. It's just a matter of what does the rule look like.
We have an opinion. We haven't yet discussed the details.
And I don't think CROA should be committed.
I worry a whole lot about us getting committed and then somebody having too much to drink, running into a dumpster, maiming 3 kids and suing the town of Celebration. So I mean, I really care that it's not us who's putting our legal liability out there.
I don't know.
Go ahead.
Let me see.
It's a point for Jack to
Can we
read.
get some input from Suzanne and
I'll
Tony
send it to you.
How are we dealing with those dumpsters now
send it to you
on
guys
on the driveways and then on the streets? Or how, Tony's not here to address it.
No,
Those have been an issue where contractors, I know contractors are going to probably swarm county commission about this dumpster ordinance when it comes up, because they're going to be complaining, where are we going to put our stuff and how long we have to keep moving it and emptying it when it's only half full. It's going to become an issue with the contractors, I think, but we've tried to deal with it.
I know so it's 2 different situations. One, when the ARC issues an approval letter for some work to take place, and in the conditions it'll say 21 days. So then
On
at
the
that
street or on the private driveway?
well,
We
there's-
only have enforcement over the...
I don't know, have we dealt with the dumpsters on the streets?
Yeah, we have before. So when it's just an excessive, so that's why I'm saying when it's tied to an ARC permit, there's a little more leverage, and you can find that you can contact the owner and kind of give them some warnings and then issue a letter to take care of that. Whether I haven't seen one make it to a fining stage yet, but it usually gives them incentive for them to move them. The trouble is sometimes people are doing interior work and you don't know where that dumpster is tied to. I've also worked with the county when the dumpsters aren't properly marked or they're overfilling. Ron Cole was the contact that I would use, and they would go out there. And so what it is the contractor is the one that rents the dumpster. So they'll have that, that's where they'll have the records.
Just to clarify, though, we will put pressure and say, hey, can you do something about the on-street dumpster? But again, we have no enforcement authority over that. We could call them, we can send them something, but they can say, no, we're not going to do anything, and that's the end of where we can go with it.
The one item that I do have to say on this that I'd like to comment just on the opposite side is how are we as the board continually looking at areas that we really don't have enforcement on and attempting a bully process, and areas that we should be bullying, but we're using the excuse of it's not our area. So I'd like us to keep in mind as we proceed with something as small as a dumpster, when it comes to let's worry about us, what we need to worry about, and let the CBD worry about what they got to worry about, let the county worry about what they got to worry about, or we need to stop picking and choose where we say we're going to enforce something and where we're going to ignore it. So I'd like to keep that in mind as the board proceeds forward.
Should we include Suzanne and Tony in this discussion with the county on the ordinance on what content it should contain, or what we feel should or should not be in it? I mean, in order for them to accomplish what they want to accomplish?
And I think that 30 days, 40 days, whatever the day limit is, we would then have the ability to put that in the ARC process to say, hey, if you're approved, you have to then abide by the county's code enforcement, and if you don't, we're going to contact the county. So they'll probably have some insightful input into it, but the county's going to need to write the ordinance based on their attorney's legal advice and everything else, and then once it's done, then we just add it as part of the process to say you have to follow the county's process. That's a condition of your approval.
As with anything else from the county.
Right.
But I think wasn't the intent on this to have it apply to Celebration only?
Well, the biggest reason why this is a problem is that when you put a dumpster on Celebration Avenue, that's what you're seeing when you come into our community, and we pride ourselves on the aesthetics and the community-wide standard, and when you have one out there like that sits out there for 4 months, that becomes problematic for us as a community. So if there was some sort of teeth behind some sort of ordinance or rule that you could enforce and say, hey, that's been way past its time frame, there's a little bit more of a sense of urgency to the contractors to get the work done when they know they only have 30 days or 45 days.
So the answer to your question is yes. Celebration subdivision parcel D.
Yeah,
That's
and I
it.
think it might be easier for the county to accept the fact that, well, we don't have to deal with the whole county, and the Celebration wants this in their, as an ordinance that applies to them, and we're good with it.
And because of,
I see what you're saying.
because of what some of the rationale you just gave.
I think to Kevin's point, the question that's in my mind is, what's the scope of our involvement? Are dumpsters something that we should be involved with? I'm not sure why you decided to go down this road 4 years ago. But what is the current scope of whether or not this is something we should be involved with, want to be involved with, have the, to use the term, hard power or soft power? And it's really unclear. You know, we engage in this interesting kabuki dance in which we say, yeah, we're interested in this, but we're not capable of doing anything about it. And then sometimes we say we're not interested in it, but we want to do something about it. And I don't know where those lines get drawn. And I want to be very clear that if you're going to speak tomorrow at CCD, that it is absolutely clear that you're speaking for CROA and not for yourself as a candidate for CCD, and that you are speaking on behalf of this board and its interests in this particular matter, because I don't think it's particularly clear what it is we're doing. And I'd like to see us continue to work on that and workshop it and figure it out. If dumpsters are a really big issue for us, then let's make it a big issue and let's figure it out and let's figure out a response to it. But this kind of backward dance that we're doing is very difficult. I don't know that the community understands it. I certainly don't understand it. And I don't know that it's defensible at the end of the day.
I think we're able to defend this. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's a big deal, but dumpsters are a big deal in Celebration, and I think we have an avenue that we can do something. It's not something we're choosing to do that we really can't do anything about and getting involved in. We can go in and actually push an ordinance to get this fixed. We have the ability to do that. A lot of things that are going on, we don't have that ability. But when you have the ability to go in and push for an ordinance that will clean up your town, a law, then, you know, we have something we can do. I don't see it as I see it differently on this issue.
Right.
And I actually thought Jack was saying something totally different tomorrow, which was you can't pass something at the CCDD
Right.
that commits CROA to something when
That's it.
CROA has never even seen it or discussed it. So you're talking about a discussion we need to have, but Jack was going to say, hey, you can't do this. You
Don't
can't
do it
commit us
now.
to something without even telling us or having our input.
Right.
It's like an unfunded mandate in a way
Yeah.
with, when they were
Just-
pushing us
just-
to issue permits.
Just defer this. That's, the message is not, don't push this through now. We haven't discussed it.
I think they're going to come back and say, you all are the ones that asked us to do this in the first place. That's the only reason why it's
Wasn't
here.
it
But
4 years ago?
4 years
Yeah,
ago,
but
no.
so
Not current.
But
There's
here's
been no review of it.
No review.
Right,
Four
but
years.
here's the bigger issue I think you need to be aware. I think that you have the county, so Jack said he tried 4 years ago and it got no traction at all, because he was working with an inspector, or the leader of the inspectors at the county. You have a higher level of the county listening right now saying, tell us what you're looking for. So this is your opportunity. And again, you might not know all the wording yet, but that they can easily put together what that verbiage should be to have some sort of restrictions on dumpsters on the road.
Steve, if I may, and I mean this with all due respect, I believe the consensus of the board here is that our only concern with this situation specifically is we would not like the CDD to sign CROA up for something that CROA hasn't discussed. What I'm hearing from management is management wants CROA to get involved with dumpsters, which if that's where we're going to go, then we need to workshop that.
We haven't decided
Well,
that.
let
what I'm
me
hearing.
be crystal clear then, so I'm
So I just
perfectly
wanna
clear
make sure
on
that's not-
what I'm saying and what you're hearing. What I'm telling you is, you have talked about dumpsters on the road for the 4 years that I've been here, and I've heard numerous complaints from residents about dumpsters on county roadway. You have the county's ear right now. It's up to CROA and the CROA board to decide whether you want to continue to go after this, but now's an opportunity where they're listening and they're willing to take action on things.
I believe it was 4 years ago, and this is jurisdiction that is outside of CROA. And if the resident wants to bring it up to the county, we can definitely provide the commissioners information right now, if that's what's coming up to you.
Well,
But
this
I
falls under
don't know.
Exhibit C rules, paragraph 2, restricted activities. It talks about parking of anything, any kind of vehicles that are,
But it doesn't specifically say dumpster, does it?
it says vehicles or equipment,
RVs, things like that.
inoperable vehicles,
But it doesn't say dumpster.
trailers.
So that's where the concern is
Okay.
dumpster. So
So
that,
we-
a charter change down the road, yes,
Actually,
but the board needs to discuss
Even
that.
if
If you
board
change your
needs to
charter,
discuss-
you can't address county roads.
So the
They're
board,
not
the
your
board
roads.
needs to discuss this. Time, we have the counties here, we'll have the counties here in a few months too. So I don't think time is the issue. Garrett?
Gary Hudspeth, 1471 Resolute Street. This is a homeowner issue. The homeowners are interested, and they have been for the last 4 years, as Steve said. They don't like having a dumpster parked next to their property for an extended period of time. We all do renovations, but you don't want it there forever and have to hide it for Christmas. So it's a homeowner issue, and they brought it up to the board. That means it is a board issue. It's no different than a homeowner coming to you and saying, this private company called Comcast is trying to bilk us for our condo fees, and I don't want to be a member of it. You thought that was important enough to bring up. Represent the homeowners. Thank you.
Okay, so we have.
I don't, wait, I got to
Situation,
respond.
there's
I'm sorry, I'm going to respond.
there's elephant in the
Wait,
room.
I want to respond to
There's a
this.
lot of things.
That's a really strange comparison to make. I'm not suggesting in any way that this isn't an issue for us. I'm asking us to define the issue. And I don't think that that's an unreasonable request, and you may disagree, but dumpsters are important, great, then let's do something and talk about it and come up with something, but let's not back into something.
That's right. We're going to make a deliberate decision.
Yeah.
And we've already discussed, we'll do that first workshop of October. Any other discussion on this or anything with the CDD process? You had something, and I don't know if it's been addressed.
No, on a quick updates, I got a 30-second item.
Sure.
I'll make it very quick. Last week, Suzanne and Steve invited me to a meeting with Smart Irrigation. They, for perspective, our irrigation stuff is all 20 years old, and like a 20-year-old car, it works, but it's not working as well. This is a new solution. There is not a proposal or anything to put in front of you. I was just invited to a meeting. Interesting. We'll see what they come back with, so I just want everybody to know there was a meeting. and if there's something to put in the budget, we'll talk about further down the road.
So will that be done in a timely way for the budget planning day?
Maybe.
We hope
Maybe, a definite maybe, okay, good. So as long as we have,
I just want people to know there was a meeting.
Was there a cost associated with it you discussed?
Maybe.
that's what
There's no answers to any questions right now. There was a
waiting for a
meeting, and
proposal.
we're waiting for stuff.
Okay.
I thought you sent an email to us.
I may have.
I think you did.
I
For
did.
budget.
Yeah, I'm just covering my bases.
I read that somewhere. Okay, so next agenda item, was there? Okay. Next agenda item, CROA committees, membership, recruitment, and resident engagement and awareness. That was put here with our, having to do with our prior discussion about a month ago on committees.
Yes, an owner, I think I asked for this to come onto the agenda so we can discuss it. An owner, after the meeting in July, came up to the board and shared some concerns, and valid concerns. There is discussion of the change of wording between two different documents that we had.
Resident and
member,
member. Yeah.
Right, so we changed them all to be resident?
We only
resident.
changed one.
We
We
changed one.
changed one, all the
So they're
others
all
had
consistent
residents.
to say
Right.
resident. And the purpose of that was for consistency. But at that point, I had learned something that I don't know if everybody else was aware of, and that was that we currently on our committees allow a non-owner to be a part of a committee or a task force or whatever the case is, which I am all about participation. I am all about listening to everybody that lives in the community and is involved in the community. However, we as a board accept the recommendation of the committees, and we normally don't argue it because we appreciate their time and their volunteering and whatever financial, change that may be with the decision that they give us. And I just wanted the board to be fully aware and understand, as well as the way this owner brought it up to me, is are we comfortable accepting essentially a change to our budget from somebody that is not a member and owner is paying that fee? So I just want to, again, make sure we are aware of that. I personally am a little uncomfortable with that. I don't know if we have any say when it comes to an apartment complex and how they operate and what amenities they provide, because that's not our right. We have no decision. If we go to any apartment complex and say, hey, we'd like to see you begin doing this, they're going to say, who's going to pay for it? You're not a member, you're not an owner, you're not a renter. So I don't know if the best way to go about that is to still include, but make it a non-voting member, so we can still hear what a renter says, but they're not affecting the budget. I don't know what the best way to go about it is, but
I think that's a good idea. We brought that up before where we were talking about if you've got a committee of 7, if you want to get input from people that are residents but not owners, add 2 additional seats that are non-voting. And you can get their input that way, but they just can't vote on them on the expenditure of money or decision-making. Vote on the decisions being made by that committee.
so that,
But you can get your input.
exactly, and that would
In a
be the
formalized
beginning.
way.
That would
Yeah.
be the beginning of a way. The other things I like to keep in mind is if a committee is full, as an example, are we allowing a renter to stay on that committee and excluding an owner? Is there a way that we need to make sure there's a turnover where an owner gets priority on that committee? Again, I know I don't have the answers to all of this, but these are things that I want to keep in mind. If we do go ahead and then have a non-voting seat, and an owner comes in and says, I'd like to be involved, why is somebody that's not an owner involved? So these are I just want to make sure we have a plan, and that situation where that owner came up with a valid concern doesn't come by surprise to us again.
Well, I guess they could always come and speak at the meeting. I mean, that really has no more authority than somebody who's a non-voting member, really.
So Susan, a technical question. Of the committees, ARC aside, because that's a whole different membership, what's our membership in terms of owners, residents versus members?
I believe, and I'm not 100% certain, but I believe we have one resident that's not an owner on all the committees.
And that would be on recreation, correct?
Well,
That would
there's
be-
an exception, though. ARC is got
Yes,
special.
Right.
ARC accepted. ARC accepted, that's different.
And covenants has some wording in there about who can and can't be a covenant member also. I think it's family members and relatives of a current board member.
Yes.
But other than
Yes.
that, the other committees, it does say, right now it says resident.
So a lot of the discussion is, really more forward-looking, because we're dealing with one person right now.
Right.
So it's really more forward-looking, if I'm reading
This
it.
is the bigger, yeah.
It's a
make
bigger
sure.
question
So
rather
if we
than-
want to continue allowing renters, maybe that might be the way that we go about it. We have one on right now, and when that individual may step down, from that point forward, we're not going to go that path. I don't know.
Or perhaps, just to go a slightly different direction, is look at our membership numbers, perhaps add a designated slot or two held only for non-owners. Because our name says CROA, Residential Owners Association, and so many renters may want to be involved and feel like they can't.
It's
I mean,
an HOA, and
so-
you got to pay your way. I hate to be
but
that
in
way.
ter-
I
but in
hate to be
term-
blunt with it, but
But in terms of a non-voting member, tapping into that interest and expertise, if that's in the community, which I know is in the community.
Well, and it's completely your prerogative, and you have the flexibility, because it's simply changing a resolution. So you could even, if you wanted to fix where you are today, you could say, for the Recreation Committee, one non-homeowner resident as a non-voting. However you want to end up saying, it's just a matter of getting the resolution updated and approved.
Do you think, though, Kevin, do we get the same effect by just saying anybody can come and speak in front of the committee of owners, rather than creating spots? Do we need to create a couple spots, or a spot on a committee that's non-voting, or do we get the same effect by just saying, come and speak in front of the owners?
I don't know. You're saying for a non-owner,
Right.
come speak. I think that would be a good way to do it. I don't know what the
I mean,
answer
do we
is,
need to
but I know
create
this is definitely
seats
something
for
that's important.
non-owners, or
That's a
just
question.
simply say, come and speak?
We
to-
welcome your input.
But then you got to announce meetings and everything. It's going to be.
Well, they do
So-
announce them don't they, on the website?
So a question in terms of resident engagement in committees, we do or do not have a backlog of people wanting to be on committees?
We do not have a backlog.
And have we in recent years had a backlog?
Occasionally, we'll have one person, so a backlog of one.
So
Mostly for covenants or ARC, though, not.
the answer is generally speaking, no. Resident, yeah. So
But
we have.
We haven't done a lot, frankly, in my mind, to recruit or to make clear who's on the committees. I would hope on the new website, we would list every committee, list every member of every committee, that we would have an open opportunity for people year-round to apply to the committee with some kind of information that's more than what we're getting right now. We have several committees like Recreation and Events and the Dog Park that are engaged in significant expenditures of time and money. And I think there's a general sense of people wanting to be involved in the community, and we should encourage that. We should support that. We should make it as easy as possible for people to engage with that.
I guess.
Agreed.
The one question I would have as I think about this is, do we just make it part of the application? Are you an owner or a resident? And we maybe say that owners will be given precedent for committee structures, but if you had a resident who rented here for a decade, that's someone who probably knows everybody, probably is very involved in the community, and might be better than some of our absentee owners, to be perfectly honest. I mean, can we give owners precedent and make it part of the application going forward? Just as a different proposal
Yeah, I
or
think it's a
thought
great idea.
process.
The other question I had, I think we brought up before, was as far as the board members having access to all the applications to review electronically, we want to see everybody that's applied. Is that what we were
Yeah,
agreeing on?
yeah, that's absolutely.
Absolutely. Include that in the conversation.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've
Even
been
though
asked
they're
to
not-
vote. We've been asked to vote on some membership applications where we know nothing other than the name, really. And that's, if these committees are meaningless, okay. But I think they're meaningful, and I think we want to know what they're doing. And because we've taken a position that we're going to defer to the recommendations of these committees in a number of areas, then I think we want to know that we're getting good people on those
I
committees.
100% agree with you. I mean, I read the minutes last night about the person who was not approved because didn't fill it out, and I don't think we should. I mean, if I had that person versus a renter who had lived here a decade and filled out everything in detail and had great experience, we in future boards ought to be able to take that into consideration. That would be my possible proposal.
We've rewritten the application so that we have more information, and all of our department heads know to send it back to them if they're not filling it out completely. So we've covered that based on,
It's two questions. What's your interest, what's your experience?
yeah,
Are you a homeowner?
Do we have that, the owner one?
not the owner
Not
one, but we
the owner.
typically look them up in the owner records, so.
You can look it up and confirm they tell us the truth.
Right.
But I'll let them
Right,
say, I'm a renter, but I've rented here for 6 years.
Yeah, that's easy enough for us to
That's
add
easy.
that on there too.
That's much different than I was a renter here for 1 month.
Are you interested in how long?
I'm just bouncing an idea. You can
Let me
agree.
add one thing. In the old charter, it used to state that the owner could transfer his voting rights to a renter by letter. Okay?
To his or her renter?
By letter, yes.
But
And so you could transfer your membership privileges as well.
Well, I'm speaking more of an apartment complex, but that is a good point to bring
I'm
up.
just saying, it's a mechanism for doing something.
On the, Susan, the individual that is a renter, are they in an apartment complex?
No.
Okay. And the reason why I bring that up is, to be fair, apartment complexes do pay per unit for a Parks and Rec fee. That might be the only real area that a renter could or should be on, because they are paying. Their unit is paying. That might be a way to go about it.
There's an
residents
added
is
level to
paying
this,
too.
though. But there's an added level to this particular situation, and that is that in the Recreation Committee, there are individuals, including this individual, who have a recreation business that is affected by the decisions made by the committee. And I think it's up to this board to decide whether or not we can accept that and we're comfortable with it, or we're not comfortable with it. But we can't possibly make that decision if we don't know that. And so, as part of this application, I think it should say, do you have any business that would come before your committee? Because it's not just enough to say, I recuse myself about that. You're there every day, and I think we want to have the integrity that goes with the process so that we know that the people making those decisions and recommendations to us are doing so in a fair and unbiased way.
I mean, we also have coaches on the rec committee. I mean, I think one of the reasons they're involved is they are involved.
There's a big difference between a coach and somebody who has a business.
Right.
Because the business signs a contract with CROA, and it is a clear conflict of interest for that business.
What
Now,
I was going to add is whether it's a business, whether it's a for-profit or not for-profit, as far as the coaches have that.
I don't think it makes any difference if it's
Yeah.
profit or for-profit.
That's what I want to add in.
So we have a couple of potential add-ons. Do you want to craft something, Susan, Steve, that you can circulate?
We'll update what we've already
And
modified.
Why
but we're-
don't you share that?
But let me just make
Go ahead.
sure I've got the two items. One is, are you a homeowner or a resident? That's a question that we're going to ask.
Yeah.
And then the second addition is, do you have a business that will come before the committee?
And if you are a resident, how long?
How long?
How long?
Do we need to define, because some people may think that's the same thing,
I mean, homeowner is a resident.
Homeowner or renter?
Eileen?
Or
Renter.
a renter, rather than a resident, because everybody's a resident.
Yeah, they will check both.
They'll check both. They'll check
Got it.
Eileen Barr, 1138 Mosaic Drive. It might also help to actually ask, for example, special events, what they're looking for in committee members, in the sense that, like, particularly on special events, it's moving to be a more hands-on committee in terms of actually glitter, and you have to sort of like glitter, and, hot wax, hot glue. I mean, they like to do things.
So are these technical terms?
Yeah, they are, yeah, and trust me.
So are you saying that the committee needs to be clear with what they are looking for? Is that what you
It
just
might
said?
pay for the board to ask, are there any particular, interests, that you're looking for members who can supply something, such as the ability, might have at least marginal interest in working on decorations, or one of the more important things, and why we would like to have another member, is that members of our committee do like to show up or try to show up at every event, at least someone.
So that-
Everybody's busy. Oh, okay.
It seems to me that goes to Jackson's point of 10 minutes ago. It says, here's what be more forthcoming on the website, and then the committee could say, now we're looking for more glitter-oriented people.
I would say, to me, I like that. Let the committee define what
Yeah.
goes on the website about what they will be looking for and what they do, so that someone applying has a clear idea, this is what this
Yeah,
committee.
and we are more
I think
hands-on.
it pays
or we
to
go-
ask the various chairs what.
Yes, exactly.
Just to finish, I mean, we like to show up at an event.
Right.
If we had the full complement of 7 members, it would be easier because people get busy and sometimes it's hard to actually get 1 or 2 people out in the field. And without that,
Good
we don't
point.
get the feedback.
Excellent point.
So
Thank you,
can I
Arlene.
reframe that just a little bit? Ultimately, you all are assigning the objectives and goals of the committees because you're delegating down certain assignments that you need assistance with. So they're kind of your eyes and ears to do those assignments. So once you've defined what that is, that's probably the key factor in who you're looking for your committees. Then you can get that additional input from the existing committee on what they think would be a good fit to come under that
think that'll
committee.
be helpful.
But I just don't want to
I think
drive,
that'll be-
I don't want to driven the other way. Committees
Right.
don't
No, no,
drive
no.
the board drives the committees.
But I think that input is very helpful. Can we have closure on that? We have 30 minutes remaining in our session. Interlocal agreement, and then Lakeside Park traffic calming efforts. You want to take one before the other? Keep them in
I
order?
can go very quickly on interlocal
Interlocal,
agreement.
please.
Well, I shot an email to the county last week, and they responded that they did have Commissioner Chowdhury brought up the change of an ordinance for them to even be able to enter into an interlocal agreement. It was supported, so their attorneys are working on it. The gentleman that was writing the interlocal agreement just got back from vacation and asked for another week or so to get that back. But we have already established priorities. I believe I sent that out to the board so that you could see what those were. It's pretty simple. It's our local groups utilizing the fields first for league play and practices, and then secondary for clinics and camps, those types of things. Our local groups have a resident versus a non-resident function to it, which meets that public purpose. After that, it was open to rentals by outside groups, including tourism, heads and beds type events.
Just for the group here, if we could have, first of all, when we met with them, they said make the interlocal fast because you want to get it done with the finances and everything of the county. But if we could get the interlocal done in advance of the town hall and make people aware before the town hall of what we're doing. If we're going to get yelled at, let's get yelled at. If we're going to get praised, let's get praised. But let's not have people saying you guys didn't tell us a damn thing and you had a town hall. If I think speed matters.
So we would have that on the, as part of the town hall, and we'll make sure, we'll need formal board approval, so we would need that on the September workshop, September board agenda, so that it meets the county timeline in a timely way.
So when Steve gets stuff, we all review it fast, we turn it fast, we make comments, we do what we can, because this, if it's worth a couple $1 million, it's worth it.
Would you like it to go to your liaisons that were representing you to the county first, or do you want it all?
I'd
to the
recommend
entire
it go to
board?
the entire board,
Just to knock it out quick.
It's going to be the first draft of it when we get it. So.
unless the board doesn't want to see it. I mean, I would send it to the entire board and don't weigh in if you don't want to weigh in.
Perfect. Got it.
Is that okay?
Are we going to engage legal counsel to review the document?
I think we absolutely
we'd have
should
to.
before we're done with it.
And will that counsel be Larson and Associates?
That's who we usually use, yes, for our general counsel.
And do we need to take this to CCDD and their counsel?
I don't believe that this is going to involve the CCDD at all because it's a change of ordinance to where they can give the funds directly to a homeowners association.
And if we communicated to CCDD that we are on this track and that we do not need their review and approval?
No, there has not been any communication with them at this point in time.
I'm asking that only because in the initial iteration of the interlocal last year, it started with CCDD, and they did legal review. And I would think that they might be working under the misapprehension that it's still theirs to do.
Well, I spoke, probably the last person on the board to speak to CDD about this, and at that point, we really didn't have a lot other than we were looking at another option maybe to get this 2-point-some million, which we think we've worked out, but we haven't at that point in time yet we didn't have enough information yet from the county. So until we actually hear from them, I don't know. If the board wants me to, I can go to them tomorrow and mention this, that they're actually looking at an ordinance change, or if you want to wait.
I think so, only because if we're trying to move quickly, CCDD could be a slowing of that process just based on meeting dates and ability.
Just like we talked about communication with them to us earlier, I think it would be good to have Vaughn could speak on this one topic.
I was just waiting till we got something more firm from the county rather than.
It's almost like closing the door before you know the door needs to be closed.
When we talk to CCDD, let's tell them we're going to move fast, we're
Yes.
working with the county, and we don't think we need to.
I would have that as a separate report from Jax.
Yeah, we'll both speak tomorrow then on our separate issues.
And I mean, I think it may be worth them working on it also. They've done a lot of interlocal agreements, and we haven't done one as a board that I'm aware of in the history. So maybe it's something they have experience with, so just make them aware in case there's anything we're missing,
If they have any input.
in case they have any input. It's
Yeah,
something they
and
do.
Tom's done interlocal agreements also. I believe he worked with Point Siena Association in their development district on their interlocal agreement they have with the county.
So I think the only real issue is the money actually coming. I think the change is basically the money's going to come to CROA rather than CDD as a pass-through.
Right, exactly.
It's really the only change that I'm aware of.
Right. I just don't want to
Well,
put
before you were doing it for a building, now it's for fields. So.
Right, and I don't want to put ourselves in a position where CCDD thinks they have to look at it, do anything, or will stall for months with their one. If they, as residents, have input, we'd love to hear it. But, you know, we might have one bite at this apple. Let's not screw it up.
And we're talking about end of September. They wanted to put a package of 3 items together from the county perspective for approval.
I fully expect something's going to show up and they're going to tell us they need our feedback in 10 days. I mean, if we need to have a special...
That'd be
Well, that may be A to Z. And if we need to have a special workshop or something to do it, but then we're going to have to think about communication. I think the 17th, hopefully, we're perfect. We're just going to need to be thinking on this one.
Okay. Anything else on this? Next item, Lakeside Park traffic calming efforts. Todd is coming to the stand.
Which one do you want first?
Or to the other seat that has not been used yet today.
Right. Well, Steve, can you put up the one that says Lakeside Park speed bump map? So, what we're looking at here, the whole reason I'm here is a few residents that I've met up at Lakeside Park have voiced concerns about evening traffic, speeding, recklessness, things like that. Spoke with Jerry Weiland from Sheriff's Department and got his ideas about some traffic calming devices because he feels that it's a problem as well. And so here's what I come up with, just to calm down traffic, is proposal for 3 different locations. So what you have is, get over here like Van. So as you first come in, our property starts where the pavement color ends, so just past the little pergola on the entrance area. So that is one proposed spot for speed bump. The second one is at the crosswalk area that goes over to the basketball court, so just by the dumpster, if y'all are familiar with that. And then another one down here in between the parking island and the trees, which is right there by court 3 and 4. So can you go to a couple next pictures there? What I'm looking at as suggestions.
The next one
go
right
to the
here.
next file. There's an image. Here's an image of a speed bump. Humps, in my opinion, don't really calm traffic. They'll slow you down a little bit, but speed bumps will really slow you down. And I don't know if you've all been up there in the evenings and seen how cars are flying through there. And I don't want to, be bad to teenagers, but it's mainly teenagers that are, showing off. So the proposal or suggestion is to put in some temporary speed bumps to initially see how they work, make sure they calm the traffic down.
What would temporary mean?
Temporary, these are, can you find a couple more images in there, Steve? They're pre-manufactured, so they're made out of rubber. They have the reflective stripe in them, and then you just, through these holes, spike them down into the asphalt.
So they can't remove them if they're out having fun?
No, but they are removable if needed, but they are not easily removed. This is in lieu of spending money to put in asphalt speed humps before you really know
What does this
if
cost?
it's going to be effective. The 3 locations that are proposed would be between $25,000 and $3,000.
2,500 and 3,000?
Yes.
In total or per?
In total. To asphalt a speed hump is right around $3,000 per hump, or bump. So
And
it is,
if we put in the temporaries, they're good for what lifespan?
lifespan is 3 to 5 years.
So we could keep them there for a long time if we
could.
wanted to.
Yes.
And the striping is
The striping
is
molded
embedded in
into
the
it.
manufacture?
It is.
So it
Yes.
doesn't fade and have to be repainted?
Right. It's molded in.
I'm cringing. I'm sorry. One, I want to see if we can throw this through ARC first and let them be the big guys. But B, when it comes to the aesthetics between that and that entrance area, I'm not disagreeing with what the issue is. Right now, the blockade, if you will, is an A-frame easel and a PVC fence that kind of stands there.
Right.
Are we better off starting to review how to close off that area at dusk, which it's supposed to be, or whatever the case is for the roadway? I don't want to see these things in for 3 to 5 years. I think they're pretty ugly. And I've seen these in other communities and they go flat. I don't know if this is the best answer.
What have we done as far as the deputy monitoring this?
I don't know the answer to that one. I mean, you have the 2 community patrol cars that sit there. I don't know what their hours are that they patrol, but that does nothing to calm traffic.
Yeah, I think
the kids see them sitting there doing nothing, and the car's sitting there doing nothing.
If we're talking about the community deputy, isolating time to just the park, I don't know that, we haven't had that discussion with them.
Yeah, it's. I invite y'all to spend an evening up there.
Maybe to put in a permanent one?
So I'd like to see 2 different things to either look at. One, there's that fence in the beginning area. Possibly that's where we kind of shut that area down at whatever the time is. Or if we look at the furthest one to the right, perhaps, because my guess is the issue for speeding is actually around that turn down into that roundabout. So I don't know if there's something simple like an arm or a metal, arm that kind of blocks that you see in different parks or parking lots and things like that. Stop them, cut them off there. It's a little more visually appealing because it disappears. When you're looking at it, you don't see it. I would have to pull up an image of what I'm thinking in my head. But I don't know if those spots, like for example, the first one coming in, is that a worthwhile location?
Is that a speed zone?
Yeah.
Isn't that the?
Because you got that curve right there, you got a stop sign right there. I'm not
To
the
cover your
expert.
arm, your thought about the arm and all that, keep in mind the tennis courts are up until 11 o'clock at night. All the activity that I've seen is before, it's usually around 7:30, 8:30 at night, while the park's still open. It's, the basketball is very busy, the court is very busy, the tennis courts are very busy during the evening, and you get a lot of car traffic of, kids showing off like we all done many years ago. But something needs to be in place, according to the residents and from what I've seen, to calm the traffic down.
It'll have to be physical because kids won't obey signs. You can put all the signs in the world.
Right.
And
Yeah,
they're not
no sign.
enforceable by the sheriff because it's private property. So you can't enforce speed limits per se. But the only way you can do it is physically slow them down.
In the interest of time, Kevin, can we have you and Todd spend some time together,
Yeah.
just thinking about options and bring it back? I mean, it seems to me like there is an issue.
Yeah.
I think we've got to have access to back there because the park's open. People use it even for parking for Columbia and stuff like that. And my wife and I've done that.
And I'd like
So,
to even run by CDD and turn around and say, hey, if we do this here, are they going to have an issue in the civic court with it? And what would they do? And let's kind of pull their, let's get their information. 'Cause
would
the
the rest
kids
of
are
the
going to
board,
find a place to go.
would the rest of the board be comfortable if we have Kevin work with Todd and come back to the group with more in the way of a solution? Would that be okay?
Solution options?
Perfect.
You're getting a full schedule today, Kevin.
See what happens when you
It's a valid point.
All about it.
Right. All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Todd. And thank you for a relatively low-cost option for us to look at. And for bringing the concern to the attention of the board. Thank you. Halloween plan, we have 15 minutes, we have 3 other major items. Halloween planning, a follow-up on completion of resident concerns, board workshops, and action items. What do you want to make sure we tackle? Halloween?
What planning do we have?
Any planning? Any discussions?
Can we try communication with the county and try to just hammer them with, hey, this is a holiday, we don't condone it, promote it, whatever the case is, but we have this issue that happens every year. What can you as a county do? You know, just keep hammering them.
I would recommend working through the development district also, because they already have that ongoing dialogue with the sheriff's department about additional officers. I believe the county has committed to allowing 12 to 15 additional officers. But the problem isn't the allotment that they have, it's actually getting deputies to sign up. And so what we've done in the past to address that is the CROA board has offered a certain amount of funding to help entice to get people to come. Because it's not them actually taking deputies that are on duty throughout the county and putting them here. They're saying if you want overtime, and a lot of the bars and clubs or different things like that on Halloween are paying more to have the deputies come there.
We should help, but we had the group earlier. We need to talk about traffic flow, and we need to talk about parking, and we need to get a plan.
Right. Well, once you start planning where you want people to park and the logistics of an event, then it becomes your event. And this is not your event. This is organic, just people showing up into town. So I completely understand it. I think we have to think through what this entails.
It may be Lexington's event, but if they're driving through our town, I mean, at least, I don't think this is one where we
I
can
don't
just.
throw them under the bus for everything. It's not like
It's not even their event. It's a non-event at all. It's not even something that you all promote or market.
But it's going to happen. So, I mean, to ignore it's not an acceptable answer. I mean, I know Jackson said, what are we going to ignore, not ignore? I think ignoring Halloween just doesn't work.
How many deputies did we get last year?
I think they had 9 altogether last year, and they do station them.
$5 additional.
CROA did, yeah, and then
And they gave
CDD
5
gave
for
5
CDD.
also. Yep.
5 per hour or 5?
10. It was 10
Per
total.
hour per deputy.
And so it ended up being 10, 5 and 5 from the
We
CDD.
discussed this in the levels of service
Yeah.
a month ago, and I
Right.
said we wanted to
The
do
money's
that.
there, right.
I think it's a great idea to raise the inducement.
Right. And
So how
they
much-
stationed
what
them.
inducement did we raise to?
I think we talked about an additional going up by $5 an hour over what was being offered. Wasn't that your suggestion, Don, at the time, that you thought that might?
Yeah, we did discuss that.
And we talked about, talked about ancillary force.
Well, I mentioned that if you can't get enough deputies sign up, that you can also get the Florida Highway Patrol involved
Right.
because they have jurisdiction.
And that's where we
in
talked about-
We talked about that.
celebrations on our streets as well.
I guess what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask Steve and whoever else he wants to work with to come back with a plan on how we're going to manage Halloween. We get the adequate number of people. We increase the funding where we got to get it. And then you talk to the county about how we're going to do traffic flow and how we're going to think about parking. I mean, Halloween's just going to happen.
Did we use Jerry's plan last year? Was it
Agreed.
Jerry's plan?
Well, the county, the deputies will station themselves at the main points, like this down here at Waterside. They will open up the stop signs and run traffic through. But we don't have a traffic flow diagram. We have one that we utilize for 4th of July, but we don't have one that we say you must do it this way. They come in with the number that they have, and they decide which entrances need to be opened and closed.
Steve, is this a good point? Well, can we bring up and clarify that report that was presented back in May? I think it was May 21st workshop, that we do have a plan in place, a documented plan that we had a task force set up, and unfortunately, a couple of the key players would not attend. And so we were kind of limited in what we could come up with, but we did come up with something, a proposal that the sheriff was in agreement with, the fire department was in agreement. We got to the point where we were just getting stagnant, and so Steve presented a report at our May 21st, I think, workshop, and it was finalized the best we could do with what we had, with the people that we had involved at that time. I think that's when Steve and I did, requested that the task force be sunsetted because of that fact. And I think the board at that meeting agreed.
Right.
Does everybody recall that?
Yes. Yes.
And that anything that came up in the future, we could have a workshop or some kind of meeting. So we did meet with, we tried to get the main players back involved again. And the main player, two of the main players at that point in time were Lexan and CDD, who stopped coming to our task force at some point in time. I don't even know, Debbie, when you were on it, did they come to the meetings then?
Gary Moyer initially came, and then another representative from CDD, but Lexan never had a representative.
They never came, and then CDD quit coming. They took themselves off the task force.
Well,
So they
the
never.
CDD, I think what Dave did is he moved the meeting over to the CDD and brought in the county for a meeting.
Well, Dave tried to hold some of the specifics towards safety, or traffic rather.
So kind of went outside there for a little bit.
They went into their own
Mode, yeah.
into their own mode.
'cause they really
did
are
not
the ones
attend ours
responsible.
anymore.
Yeah.
So we were kind of at a standstill. We did produce some kind of report that, with what we had. And so I know one of the residents had commented about, what happened to the task force and what meetings have we been having subsequent to that. And the only one what we've been trying to do is get CDD back involved again in this process that initially got going, and then somehow the train ran off the track to some extent. So we tried to get Lexan back involved to whatever extent we could, and CDD back involved in our meetings. So we had one meeting initially. I don't remember, Paul, when it was. It was after the task force was ended. We tried to talk to them and see if we could maybe start getting back, because bottom line is we're all still part of the community, but it's very tough to sometimes get all the players seated at the same table for various reasons. So we did meet. Once was just they were both informal, just to talk and see if there was any possibility of everybody getting back together again. And then we met again and talked about, what events maybe down the road we could look at coordinating with each other. And I don't think we got beyond that, did we?
Well, at this point, it's with Lexan. Mike Nunez has to set up a meeting with his tenants to talk to them about the music on Market Street and possibly moving the farmers market back to Market Street. But we did talk a little bit about the plan and about future events and utilizing all of those resources that were identified in the plan. So that was part of the initial conversation. And the importance of doing that to Lexan and the other entities, us included, that hold these big events and celebration, the importance of actually utilizing, even though there's no teeth or enforcement under it, there's soft power, not a lot of hard power, but it is a best practice recommendation on how those events should be utilized.
And I don't know, did that report ever, the question came up from a resident as well, did the report ever get to CDD? I don't recall.
Well, their representative has it. I don't know if they took it back and shared it with the development district.
Well,
but we distributed that to the folks that were representative from the CDD.
That's right, that ad hoc that we had set up.
And I also sent it out to everyone
Okay.
that was part of the initial task force, and they had Floyd was included being copied on that, and I think Dave Ora was also included on that. So even though that those folks weren't still coming, I was still emailing them as part of the conversation.
Did all the members get a copy of it?
That would be a question for the development district on whether or not they distributed it
To the
all
representatives,
their-
yeah.
Right.
I meant on the one that you talked about in May. Did you send that to the original committee?
When we were done, I sent that to the task force, correct?
The original task force.
Yeah.
Even if they weren't
I think
attending.
she's asking, did everybody on the task force get a copy? Is that
I-
correct?
Yeah, they should have, yes.
I have two questions, and then I actually got a third that just came up. One, there's an email that the entire board has been seeing. We all said, based on the way it is, we'd like management to reply. I got another, I think we all got it actually this morning, right before this meeting. I don't think a reply has still gone out to that person. So I'd like to make sure that.
Can we answer those
done.
right now? What questions have not got answered yet?
I'm just looking at
Management was asked to reply based on the homeowner record request, but not to the actual questions,
Okay.
because I think you guys were going to
We're gonna
have to talk a little bit after this meeting and then get a response out after this.
Requires a discussion with the attorney.
That's the one.
Just because of the legal aspect involved in it. No?
The second one is between the two different committees, ad hoc versus the current, whatever term you want to use. Is the only individual that's different this one person that's emailing, apart from just the police, but as far as celebration people?
What we did was we authorized Jack and Vaughn to have a conversation with Mike Nunez just to start to open a dialogue. And it was not a committee or anything like
not a
that. It
committee.
was
In the
strictly
development
just a reach out, how are you doing? It does no good for us to have no dialogue. That's solely what that was, 3 people.
Okay.
And the other
And that's a
point-
new committee.
It's not a committee.
Not a committee at all.
No, and I'm not even sure if we're going to meet again, but the
discussion.
question, to answer your question was, the only way we could get those parties together in that ad hoc kind of a break the ice kind of meeting was if certain individuals
Is by leaving it
weren't
open.
invited, because
Like a better-
that was the stumbling block in our task force. So
As long as I understand that.
But
We don't have
to be
continue.
perfectly clear, what we said was we were not going to worry about any individuals or any other groups. We just wanted Jack and Vaughn to reach out to Mike Nunez to say, hey, we're all in the same town, let's at least have an open dialogue. And that's what I think Jack and Mike, or I mean, Jack and Vaughn did, reach out.
Okay. And then my third question that just popped up, you mentioned the farmer's market possibly going back to Market Street. Just out of curiosity, that farmer's market is a CROA then?
Correct,
Right.
yes.
And that Market Street is a Canoa property.
Correct.
So it's courteous, but why do we have to wait for Lexington to talk to their tenants about that?
Well, Lexington has the perpetual usage agreement. I think that's a whole nother.
So if they're not
work
using it,
contract.
then we can.
Correct, yes. Yeah, and I
So
think they're
they're not using
they're
it,
looking
okay.
for a location that just might draw a bigger crowd, and I think that's why they talked about possibly moving it there. Nothing's set in stone though, it's just
Yeah, it used
a
to be
feeler
there.
right
It was
now.
great
It was
there,
there.
and
for
the
a
tenants
while.
has to get it out.
suggestion, and Mike was afraid that there would be tenants there that were going to complain about losing business. So that's what he's trying to meet with them about.
Okay, thank you.
And so let me bring it back to the Halloween conversation then. I heard what Brian said, so JR and I will reach out to the CDD. We'll talk to whoever their liaison is that's talking to the deputies. We'll find out how many they're allocating. We'll find out how much money it's going to take to entice more deputies to actually sign up. And then we'll share with them the traffic plans, and we'll talk to them about what their thoughts are on traffic plans, and then we can kind of go from there.
But it's also in terms of the sheriff's deputies, that also, if they don't get enough signing up, reaching out to the highway patrol.
Correct. Now, remember, if we go to Highway Patrol, we're paying the full amount for that, because the sheriff right now is paying for their fee to be here in celebration that night. Just we're bringing in the enticer to bring in a little bit more.
It's an add-on to their,
So now you are budgeting, I mean, we did add in an additional $5,000 into that already $5,000 line that you could utilize for that, but there's a little bit difference in
But
fee.
when we had the previous discussion, I thought we all agreed we
Yeah.
wanted it to be
Yes.
a safe
Right.
and organized
Yeah. Yes.
evening to the best of our ability and what we can
Exactly.
control.
okay. Anything else? We're at 1 minute of, do we want to tackle anything? We're going to have a brief break before our executive session. The attorney is calling in at 11:15.
Can we agree that completion of resident concerns will be topic number one when we
Yes.
go to our next
Yes.
workshop, just so that.
Yes, so
because
that
there
we
have
do
been a
that.
couple of people who've cared about that, that way it gets moved up.
Right. That sound like a plan? Can we reconvene in 10 minutes? So we're at 10 after, and we'll do a couple of other brief updates that tie into legal matters before we engage Tom on the phone. Is that fair? Thank you. Meeting's adjourned. Recessed. Thank you. The open meeting.
Susan, on the financial.
Yeah.
I think And you just read this stuff. Every place that didn't come,
Highlighted it.
I highlighted, so you either agree or disagree from a numbers perspective. From a numbers perspective, I just paid 465 for 465 for change right there.
Right.
Which is 35 before, I mean, that's just a small thing. And what I did here was I changed this to $2,000. My thought process being, I want to build a bridge that sends the entire with the stuff off that water.